The IDPros podcasts on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network are brought to you by Circa Sports. Circa Sports is back with their Circa Survivor and Circa Millions contests. $14 million are up for grabs. Get all the details at circasports.com. That's CIRCA sports.com.
And so, the IDP Pro Manager Pod is a proud member of the Sports Gambling Podcast Network, home of the hottest, smartest, and fastest-growing sports gambling and fantasy football providers and professional sports entertainment today. And now, without any further delay, here are your veteran senior IDP pros, Kraig and Gary, sacking today's hottest NFL IDP. Damn it, sorry about that.
Hello again. It is Friday, July 21st, 2023, and you are on with the IDP Pros Managers Pod. I am Craig Reith, and with me as always, this is episode 21, Gary the IDP Tipster. Gary, how is July 21st treating you in the end of the week?
It's going great, man. Getting excited. We're so close to freaking football. I can almost smell it. How about you, brother?
Yeah, it's the busy time of the year where school stuff is starting to pick up, having to get all that stuff for the kids, and then more sports stuff and swimming lessons and all sorts of crazy stuff. So running around, keeping busy, but it keeps me out of trouble, so that's good.
Yep.
We are this week going into NFC South stock reports. This is going to be our last week of the divisional reviews of mainly veterans going our stock up, stock down for the 2023 season. And next week, we're not completely sure, but maybe we'll be bringing you a mock draft, offense and defense blended. We'll see what we want to put together for next week, but we have news for you. And we're starting to get into, as Gary mentioned, football coming up here with people reporting to training camps and all that. So we do have some NFL news here for you. First up, we have from the Cleveland Browns, defensive tackle Perrion Winfrey has been released from the team. He is a relatively new player. He is 2022 fourth-round draft pick, and he has been released following and he's been named as a suspect in a alleged robbery incident, and this comes after he had an incident that was dropped, but I believe it was some sort of an assault earlier in the year that he had been named and that got dropped. So there's enough of at least alleged issues with him that he's been dropped. We'll see if he gets signed on anywhere else once stuff gets cleared up completely. This is more breaking news. This just came out today on the old Twitter. I saw 28-year-old free agent defensive end / edge player Dwayne Smoot. He was visiting with the Ravens, but he re-signed with the Jaguars for a one-year deal worth up to $6.25 million, but $3.25 million guaranteed. So they're continuing to bolster that edge position for the Jaguars and the high hopes they have of making more noise in the playoffs this year. Speaking of big noise in contracts, Steelers signed edge Alex Highsmith to a 4-year, $68 million contract extension. So they're going to have him across from J.J. Watt at that edge position for the Steelers for at least a few more years here. And after that breakout year he had last year, certainly they appear to want to lock him up for the long term. And most NFL fans can rejoice. The league has officially approved the sale of the, for now, Washington Commanders from Daniel Snyder to a group of investors, but the main one was Josh Harris. Sale is set for $6.05 million. So that has gone through. Josh Harris is the new majority owner. He's been out celebrating with fans, and there's talk that they're going to be doing another name change. So they've gone from the name that shall not be named to the football team to the Commanders, and who knows what is next, but they've certainly got a lot going on there.
That just keeps selling that merchandise.
Yeah, more and more jerseys with different names, certainly.
Mm-hmm. And people, rightfully so, they'll be excited again. I mean, it should be. Dan Snyder's gone.
And speaking of excited, in a couple weeks here, I think it's 3 weeks, but by my math, 3 weeks, there's the Fantasy Football Expo that is coming up in Canton, Ohio. There's festivities starting on some people do get there Thursday night, but certainly Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then some people do some things into Monday. But that's down in Canton. And Gary, I know you're going to be there, and a whole bunch of people from SGPN. What do they got going on for the expo this year?
Man, I'm excited just to sit in the room and listen to these guys make these plans for the expo, man. You got to come by the SGPN booth for one thing on Sunday, and I believe Saturday this year. But there's going to be some like contest prize gives away. Believe me, they've got big plans, man. You want to check out that SGPN booth for sure. Check out their flag football team. Hey, I'll be there. I'm not playing. I'm all broke down. You don't want me on the field at this point. So, but I guess I might be able to throw a ball, but once, then the shoulder goes out and it's all over. So it's just not happening. But man, big party Friday night. We got the Kings Classic. I guess you're going to be in with the all IDP. That's really cool. Playing some poker. Everybody stop by. And also, before we start on our division, on our division, I just want to remind everybody we still haven't given away the Roquan Smith jersey, and it's for the BC Classic and breast cancer awareness. We're still posting that on Twitter. Only thing you have to do is you just have to make a small donation of any, like $3 or anything, and then put a snapshot of it of any organization, national organization, and put a snapshot with a Twitter post of hashtag IDPROS, IDPros, and share it. That was horrible.
And, no, that's fine. I just wanted are members able to join? Should I be donating to try to win that jersey or?
Oh, yeah. Yes, sir. We exclude nobody. This is yes. I'm going to keep the one I have up here. I got it and I liked it too much, so I'm going to keep that. Hey, Jamie, how's it going, brother? Yeah. I've decided to keep that, man. That's the one I bought. I got it in the package. I'm like, you gotta be, this ain't happening. So yeah, I'm just gonna probably get a frame and everything, but I'll order you your own. Is how this will probably work, folks.
Sounds good.
The IDPros podcasts on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network are brought to you by Circa Sports. Circa Sports is the sponsor of Circa Millions and Circa Survivor, which are both back. Over $14 million in guaranteed prizes are up for grabs. With the Circa Millions, you have 5 NFL picks against the spread every week, and with the Circa Survivor, you just pick a different money line winner each week of the season. Enter in Vegas, play from anywhere. The Sports Gambling Podcast will be out there in the last weekend of August. Come join us. Get all the details at circasports.com. That's CIRCA sports.com. What would you do with that money if you won? I, for one, would retire. And my survivor pick to start the season is going to have to be the Kansas City Chiefs, defending Super Bowl champions, taking care of business against the Detroit Lions to start the season Thursday night in Week 1.
All right. And going into the divisional review for the last one here, alphabetically, of course, we got the Buccaneers first. And standard leagues, got Ryan Neal as a guy that you're liking heading up here. So he's moving from the Seattle Seahawks, where he was sort of the useful, certainly during the year, replacement for Jamal Adams whenever he was hurt. And now he's with the signing of Julian Love. They still have Jamal Adams. Quandre Diggs is still there. He decided to move on. He is going over to the Buccaneers to be a safety next to Antoine Winfield Jr. So what are you liking about his situation there in Tampa Bay, Gary?
Well, he's definitely stocked up compared to where he was in standard leagues last year, flashing or not. So, I mean, I'm looking at an overall aspect. But I guess the recent report is that him and Winfield will be switching positions, and Winfield will be the free safety, is the rumor. So putting Ryan Neal more in an aspect of what we would look at Winfield last year being in the box. So I would say, knowing this, the history of this defense, despite the fact they haven't got the pass rush, I don't see the value in Antoine Winfield this year. I think that it's going to be a sneakier play to get Neal and he's going to be playing closer up into the box.
So I know we don't necessarily have him on the list here. Well, I guess we do later on, but we can get to him. You're kind of seeing Winfield as a guy trending down then with that change?
I can't see. It's tough to call. It's a super tough call. When they originally started last year, and they had two healthy safeties with Edwards and Winfield, they actually did a rotation where they would move Winfield deeper on the field, put Edwards up, and things were working out really well. And they were working out well for IDP for the most part too. And then the injuries started happening. So a lot of that switched. It wasn't a very big window of it to begin with. Anyhow, that interests me with Winfield, thinking that it is possible that Ryan Neal and him could possibly do some type of thing like that. But in the overall aspect of thinking of the box safety or the deep safety, if Winfield's playing deep, it's just notoriously not known for producing at a DB1 level. So why would I be interested in Winfield unless I'm looking at him more as a first guy or a DB2? I mean, I'm just not excited about Winfield. Last year he performed well, but his injuries and such, he never did really reach at top tier, in my opinion.
Yeah, and it's something to certainly keep an eye on. Of course, we're talking about a lot of these things with what they're saying coming out of training camp and pre-training camp. Make sure you see how these players actually get used and what the actual plan is, because things change. Injuries happen. Who knows how it's going to play out? But if you're drafting right now, it's something to be paying attention to and be aware of with the difference between those two safeties and the current plan that's out there. But in standard leagues, this is going to ruffle some feathers. Certainly, you got Devin White with an arrow pointing down.
Yeah, definitely. After his performance last year, PFF hadn't loved on him. He hadn't had glowing reports. He didn't take that step that you would traditionally think he would at that point in his career, especially after the performance he had his rookie season. Of course, we keep saying it. The problem is Levante David is also there getting his production, which I'm preferring this year altogether, even though the guy might be on his last year or two. He's still at a high level of play, and I'm preferring him over taking any shares of White of what he's going at least in the ADP sleeper leagues that I'm in, or, by their ADP. And just in general, I've seen him going into his top 5, and I'm just not interested because of the performance that he is just not managed to peak again. We got to get that level back up to somewhere in the area it was his rookie season for us to keep crowning this guy a top option.
So I think part of this is, and I think, Gary, you're referencing his second year in the league, because that's when he had the 140 tackles and the 9 sacks with the 15 tackles for a loss. It was his second year. And we've seen this with other players where, there was someone that I was just thinking of, Shaq Leonard's another one, where his rookie year, he came on and, just exploded. And then he had nice years the next 2 after that, but people are still chasing that high from that rookie year. And I think it is sort of the same thing with Levante here, where that second year was a breakout. And he's had good years since then. The past 2, he's had 3.5, 5.5 sacks, 8 tackles for a loss each year, some pass deflections, and 128, 124 combined tackles. Those are good numbers. Those are certainly some, linebacker 1 weeks in there. It's just you're not probably going to reach back to that 140 and 9 sacks while, like you mentioned, Levante David is there. But I do want to say he's in a contract year, and we know that can be some motivation for some players out there. And, he made some comments about not wanting to be in Tampa if they don't want him, or wanting to be traded, previously in the year. So you could see him have another very nice year while he's searching a paycheck. I'm not saying he's that type of person, but there are those players out there, and we've seen that time and time again where that contract year, people blow up. So
huge point there, man. That's great. But I just want to make sure that I heard you right. You said 149 sacks.
140
I just wanted to
combined
make sure.
tackles, 9 sacks in his second year. Yep.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to make sure.
I may have messed that up, but it was 9 sacks and 140 combined tackles.
Just in case, it could have been my old ears, but I just figured that maybe.
No, it's worth clarifying.
Repeat that. 149 sacks. Could you imagine that? That would be no, impossible.
That's 9 sacks a game, something like that. Yeah, you'd have your whole offensive line blocking you by week 5 if you were averaging 9 sacks a game or something.
That's some deep shit. Just like this next guy I'm going to talk about is a deep standard or a deep league guy. He's I think a little bit stock up, or he's coming off some good momentum. My cats are apparently trying to break in, so if you guys hear banging, it's not the police, it's my cats. The cops were here last night. But anyways, when it comes to Anthony Nelson, last year he got the opportunity to step in after Shaq Barrett got hurt, and he actually outperformed the I believe second or third round props. Joe Chiron. No, I'm not probably.
Tyrone Joe Chiron was the end of a first round pick.
Right. And Anthony Nelson actually came in and played on the strong side, which is the harder side to play as a edge rusher. He played better and actually had some decent deep league play last year. I was advising on my start sit charts that he would have some decent opportunities, and he did. He performed on those opportunities. So I'm going to stick him on here. And the main reason, Shaq Barrett, he was injured. Joe has not lived up to his draft status, I guess you could say at this point. So I'm just throwing a little, dart out at Anthony Nelson in some super D-Gen leagues just to see what happens.
And so with that, are you kind of feeling you're down on Joe Tryon? There's been, some coaching chatter talk about him, saying, he's
definitely down on
Joe. He's going to have a great year.
Right.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah. I guess I didn't say that in the same breath. In the same breath, I'm down on Joe anymore. I mean, he had a little upside last year, especially with the draft stock. And I mean, he just, maybe he's performing well for the Bucs, but he's not doing it in the box score for us.
All right.
So, leading me, we've already talked about Antonio Winfield Jr. I mean, did you have any more thoughts? I think you pretty well summed that up. I have him on the list here at the very end. I apologize.
I like him long term. Like you mentioned, though, if he is going to be switching to free safety, you're probably not going to be getting that higher level unless it's sort of free safety in name and they're switching like they had done years before. It's not going to be what you were excited about. The only thing that might save you is that, he is still a ball hawk. He is still a playmaker, but at that point you're betting on those big plays, which are so hard to 1, get and then 2, count on. You're just playing with fire at that point. So if you're more of a gambler and you want to try it, go for it. But I think the end of the year, you'll probably get burned more often than not trying that.
Speaking of gambling,
The IDPros podcast on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network is brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. Best Ball Mania 4 is here, and Underdog Fantasy is giving away $15 million in prizes. Underdog Pick'em is also a great way to get down on your favorite Major League Baseball and college baseball player props. So many ways to win over on Underdog and active in so many states. Head on over to UnderdogFantasy.com and use the promo code SGPN for a 100% deposit bonus up to $100. That's UnderdogFantasy.com, promo code SGPN.
One of these days I'll update that damn video too. So yeah, we're doing the South, folks, NFC South. If you watch that.
Before we get into that, though, we did have a question here from Jamie, Gary. Thoughts on, and I think we mentioned this. I think we did the AFC South last week, but we can go over this again. Thoughts on Harold Landry coming back after missing all last season? He's been getting them in round 30 of Superflex IDP best ball draft. So you think that's a fair spot to be taking him?
I'm assuming that this might be, is he saying IDP only or is he saying blended?
It says SF. I would assume that's super flex, so I'm assuming it's blended.
All right. Yeah. Okay. I mean, round 30. Here's my general thoughts about any edge rusher that's coming off any type of knee injury to begin with. I don't expect anything out of them for the first year back, at least for the half of the season. So I usually avoid them if I'm thinking about a redraft. Now, when it comes to a dynasty, that's a whole new ball game when it comes to Landry. Yeah. I'm going to put him on my squad if I have room and let him sit or see what happens. But it's pretty tough. I kind of have my doubts about Gary up in Green Bay. I'm not grabbing any new fresh shares of him at the moment, unless I happen to be thinking about dynasty. But at the moment, I'm not. So you've got to be a little bit concerned. These guys make a living on bending that edge, and those guys get vertical. They need those knees and they need those legs. So it usually takes a little bit. I've never really seen anybody that I can think of. I don't know about you, Kraig, but anybody that you know of that's ever had a serious knee injury and then came back and had a Pro Bowl year?
I don't know of any off the top of my head. Year. I would have to sit and look into it. The only thing really in Landry's favor is,
tough.
I mean, Landry was out all of last year because he got injured September or something like that. So he's had basically a full year to be sitting out and rehabbing. Where Gary, I think it was November where Gary got hurt. So he's on a much shorter time frame even.
They work miracles. I just, like I said, I have a hard time putting a lot of stock into it. I know that like on Sleeper, you'll have the dual designation for Landry, which just really ups that value even more as a IDP play. A lot of risk there. Still a lot of risk there.
All right. And Dave, we'll get to your question in a little bit here, but we're going to make sure we get to the Falcons here. Standard League's heading up. Gary, you had the sort of the inside linebackers there, like more of like Kaden Elliss, Troy Andersen type of guys. Are you liking both of them? Mm-hmm. I know you've talked about Kaden Elliss quite a bit.
Oh, yeah, I love Kaden Elliss. I think he's going to be the guy to actually come in here and hit the grand slam IDPs. I love this kid. I've been watching him. Well, we all watched him last year, and him following his former defensive coordinator to Atlanta on purpose because this kid knows this defense that they're going to be implementing. I love him. Troy Andersen, I keep waiting for them to make another signing or re-sign Evans or something like that. But as long as Troy Andersen is the guy, he's definitely even in Standard League stock up because we have seen it in the past. Even though there is going to be a scheme change, think a little bit more of New Orleans scheme than the former Falcons now. But there's still room for two productive guys in here. And the question is Andersen, in my opinion, is Andersen going to stay on the field for 2 downs or 3 downs? And what kind of packages is he going to be in? Production by default. Hey, I love it. It counts in IDP every year, and it's going to matter. The standard up on Troy is nowhere near what I feel it is with Ellis.
And Andersen, he's a guy that he didn't completely play linebacker his entire time at college. He had played quarterback, running back, fullback. Then he moved to linebacker. He's a super athletic guy. He's got great size and, 236 pounds, 6'4", just really raw. And he showed that last year, but he was productive in a few spot starts last year when he was able to get on the field for the majority of those snaps. So he is certainly something really interesting in Dynasty. And if he is going to be out there for 3 downs, like you mentioned, Gary, that production by default that we've seen out of Atlanta lately from those linebackers, it could be huge for you. And then this feels like you're just getting on after someone's age. But Calais Campbell, one of the old guys in the league, you got him with stock down here on his new team.
Yeah, and it's not just age. I have some concerns. I think they've built a very formidable veteran and one of the best-looking interior defensive lines that they've had in a long time, as a group around Grady Jarrett. But that long in the tooth and thinking of the scheming that might be implicated, I am not sure that there's going to be anybody that's going to be standing out, So, and again, on age, the guys went to Baltimore. He after, where was he? Pittsburgh originally? No?
Arizona, I think.
Yeah. Well, either way, his last year in Baltimore, he was nowhere near the level that he had played before, and it's kind of a different scheme. He's not the big edge rusher dude that he used to be. So I would have to say that, if you don't know this in standard leagues, you definitely might want to be looking at some of these newer and brighter guys, especially for dynasty leagues.
And Calais had 9 years in Arizona, 3 in Jacksonville, and then 3 in Baltimore. So he's been a couple places.
That's
you
right.
can tell, this is going to be his 16th year in the league. So he's been around. He's a crafty veteran at this point. But the days of double-digit sacks are well behind him.
Yeah, and he's going to be playing more of an interior defensive lineman than he is off of an edge rusher like he was at Jacksonville, now that you mention it.
Deep guy here, guy that had been really good his first few years in Cincinnati, were first 3 out of his 5 years there. He had over 100 combined tackles, quite a few pass deflections. He's averaged almost 3 interceptions a year for his career. Jessie Bates on his new team with a big contract going from Cincinnati to Atlanta.
Yeah, there's nothing not to like about the whole situation in my point of view. I think it's really similar to the situation when he was drafted and with Cincinnati. As Cincinnati built after Jessie Bates, they got a lot better across the defensive line. The whole situation changed in front of them. So the production was not available deep in the field where he plays free safety normally. So with Atlanta, we look at Atlanta's pass rushers. Okay, now Lorenzo Carter, he had a decent year last year. I actually liked him in a few deep formats and start sits and suggested him, and he came through and passed all things that I like to do with him in flying collars. Put the back, but his floor or his ceiling is everybody else's floor, so we got to avoid him. We're going to talk about the other guy they just drafted last year, but I mean, nobody's standing out. Bud Dupree has not been able to do anything for a couple of years, and we have an aging interior defensive lineman. I'm afraid we're going to see pressure, but we ain't going to see that pressure that's going to make a difference if that quarterback holds that ball a couple more seconds. Does this make sense? So I think we're going to see a lot of secondary play, and I think we're going to see a lot of Elliss and Jessie Bates cleaning up, just out of volume this year. That's how I look at this defense as a whole. And Jessie Bates, I love to say that he was a standard up as well, and he possibly could be. But at the price of a DB, a dime a dozen anymore, it's really hard to say that in the standard. So I'm just going to say a deep up, leading to David Owenmata.
Owenmata, yep.
Yep, wow. This guy, I just wanted to bring him up as a deep down. He's been on people's radars for a while, and he's in the center of this interior defensive line. I believe that his main role may end up being the nose tackle position. That's one reason not to like him, but for another, he's just never really lived up to anything. And I'm still throwing out the red flag about the whole. I want to see something come out of this Atlanta interior defensive line before I ever suggest going here right now. That leads me to asking you. We got a little. I'm going to call him Arnold E. He was their big profile guy coming in the last year. There were a lot of people that was hoping for him to be able to, make a difference, and he hadn't. And right now they brought in Bud Dupree, and that looks like a signing that puts Arnold E. as a depth player in rotation. Any thoughts on him?
I think they're hoping that he, Mr. Ebiketie, decides to go out and take the bull by the horn, so to speak, and grab that role from Bud Dupree. We haven't seen a whole lot of Bud Dupree since he left Pittsburgh. He got injured, of course. That was part of it. he's getting up there in age a little bit. And Arnold here, he's just 24 years old, second round pick last year. He had a couple flashes in a few games, but it certainly seems like he kind of hit that rookie wall towards the end of the year. Sometimes it takes these guys a couple of years to get it figured out. Sometimes they don't figure it out, but I think they're hoping with that young defense that he's able to earn a role and go ahead and take that from Bud Dupree. So, Dynasty, he's certainly a hold in your IDP leagues. If you're in deep IDP leagues for redraft, where you're playing a lot of guys, maybe you grab a hold of them, but generally speaking, you're probably not drafting him in most leagues at this point. And I wanted to mention about David on that interior defensive lineman. He kind of feels like he's another example of people chasing what they've seen for a couple of years. So, this is going to be David's, I think, 8th year in the league. He had spent all of them with New Orleans. He's had really 2 good years. He had 6.5 sacks, 44 tackles, and 10 tackles for a loss in 2020. Last year, he did all right, 43 combined tackles, 5 sacks, 5 tackles for a loss. And he is, like you mentioned about Kaden Elliss, going from New Orleans to Atlanta. So I think there's some people grasping onto that, but it's not going to be the same situation. And I think you are maybe deep defensive tackle required leagues. If you're taking him as your 3rd defensive tackle or something, you might feel all right about it. But it's hard to go ahead and consider this guy in standard leagues at all.
Right. Hey, Dave, we didn't forget about you, brother, but real quick here, let me tell you how you can enter that Roquan jersey contest.
Hey, all you crazy IDP fans. We are hosting the IDPros Breast Cancer Awareness Giveaway, where you can win a Roquan Smith Baltimore Ravens jersey. All you have to do to enter is donate $3 or more to any nationally recognized cancer organization and post a pic of your donation with the hashtag IDPROS. That's hashtag IDPros. The drawing will be held on August 24th. Find more information on this podcast Twitter page or on any of your favorite IDP Pros accounts. Enter today and help us bring cancer to its knees.
All right. So your question here, Dave. What are your guys' general thoughts about Tre'Davious White this season? Hashtag Bills Mafia. So going back a ways here, Tre'Davious White came into the league. He, I think, got second in Defensive Rookie of the Year. Yeah, he was behind Marshawn Lattimore, his Rookie of the Year, when he came into the league here in 2022. He's had a couple really nice seasons in 2019 and 2020. He was a Pro Bowler. He was an All Associated Press first team, second team. He's had nice interception numbers to start his career, but then he got injured. So in 2021, he suffered a non-contact knee injury, he tore his ACL. And then last year, he was trying to get through the season pretty much. He was on the PUP list for a while. He made his return to play on Thanksgiving, and they had to sort of phase him in. They only played in 6 games last year and didn't do a whole lot. But are you sort of expecting, maybe not for fantasy, because we know really good cornerbacks aren't necessarily really good for fantasy football, but are you expecting him to bounce back and sort of return to form now that he's had time, and he did come back last year for a little bit?
I was hoping you was asking Dave, and Dave could somehow answer you. It's a cornerback, man. Yeah, I'm going to sit there and stream his ass if he starts producing. That's all I got. I'm sorry, Dave, but
real life, though, do you think he's going to be able to return to form for the Bills as they pursue that Super Bowl?
Well, he was an elite guy, and this kind of bounces back on the idea of the whole injury situation to begin with. I mean, there's about him to make a call, Craig. I just really don't, brother.
All right. Well, we will move on. Next team up here are the Panthers, and we got Jeremy Chinn, he of that safety linebacker hybrid, one of the more productive ones that we've had in the NFL to this point. Gary, you got him on your standard looking up here, and I know there's a lot of people still taking him in that, top 10 of defensive back. So you thinking he's going to have a chance with that linebacker core and the way they're sort of revamping it and haven't done a whole lot, revamping the defense, but haven't done a whole lot with the linebackers, and he's going to have a shot to possibly play more linebacker like he has?
Yeah, I think in general he's been a letdown. He's been a letdown for the last year or two, and I just wanted to really bring this whole topic up by putting him in here, thinking of how he performed last year when he did play. So I really think this whole Von Miller, Xavier Woods, I think they had signed even another fourth decent safety. And the fact that their best guy that they brought in for inside linebacker through free agency, after saying they're going to move Frank Louvu all over the front seven, which means that he can't be playing the inside linebacker next to Shaq Thomas all the time. There's my edge. I think Chinn is going to actually maybe be that defensive back / linebacker again. I'm not sure we're going to see two inside linebackers on much if it's not Louvu in some type of package or otherwise, according to them, just taking a wild guess. So I think in that combination, if that follows through, then we could definitely see a better standard league result from Chinn.
Yeah, like you mentioned, they got a lot of guys back there at safety. They got Von Bell, who came over, Xavier Woods, who's been there for a couple of years. Eric Rowe came over from Miami, and they drafted a guy out of FSU in the 5th round, too, Jamie Robinson. So they got a glut of guys there. We'll see if one of them plays up close to that linebacker role, if they use a third safety more like we've seen a lot of teams do, because they, in theory, are going to have a really nice set of cornerbacks with J.C. Horn and then Dante Jackson in terms of real-life cornerbacks, again, not necessarily for fantasy. But Derek Brown, big guy, former first-round pick, defensive tackle, switching like they did sort of last year, more to that 3-4, or it might even be this year that I think that they're switching to that. But either way,
this year.
Certainly you're not generally having as productive of players on the defensive line at a 3-4. That's just based on the nature of it. There are your outliers, of course, that you can find, but he is on your guys pointing down this year.
Yeah, definitely. He's not did anything in a better system built for a defensive tackle. So I don't really see anything all of a sudden happening or changing for him here this year. There's just not been enough grade film or anything to indicate that there's another step here. Probably just a product because of his high draft status. It happens because of class. The level of class that you get in each rookie class, which would mean, even though he's a first rounder, if he would have been in a different year, he might have went, I don't know, third or fourth or a couple different rounds. That's an example. Not saying Derek Brown was a first rounder. I just know he was a high draft pick.
Yep. But you do have someone on the defensive line here for your deep leagues that you're considering, a stock up player, DeShawn Williams there, who came over from Denver.
Just because of being a veteran, being thrown into this mix, he's been productive on a deeper format. That's why it's a deep stock up. I like his addition to the line, and if there is anybody coming off of this line that I think that's going to end up getting any kind of real production, it's probably going to be DeShawn Williams over Henry Andersen, Shai Tuttle, or Derek Brown. I mean, that's where he's going. So just in his leadership, what he's played before, I believe, with Denver for a few years, and then previously he's been in the league for a while. So, yeah, definitely a deep standard or a deep DGen type of guy to keep an eye on.
Yeah, he came into the league with Cincinnati in 2016 and then had 3 years in Denver. A little bit older than you'd think for someone only playing 4 years. This will be his 5th year. He turns 31 in December. But to your point, had some time in college. Certainly, if he's that old, he had his best season last year by far for Denver with 37 combined tackles, 4.5 sacks, 4 tackles for a loss. So maybe he'll be able to replicate some of that in Carolina.
Yeah, I mean, and that just goes to show on how poor the interior defensive line is looking. I'm talking about a 31-year-old. Let's see who we got next on the list with the down. I would have to say that all hope has to be given up on Gross Mattis at this point.
He's a guy that I really like coming out, and the nice thing about last year, he sort of had the first 2 years in the league sort of similar numbers, and he had similar sack and tackle for a loss numbers last year. It was nothing exciting, like 2.5 and 5, but he did have a lot more tackles last year. The whole reason I kind of thinking he's a down too is this is a really big dude. I mean, when you look at him, he's 6'5", 265, and now they're moving him, or in theory, he's going to be an edge player or in a rotation across from Brian Burns. He's a guy that's more suited, I think, to be down. If they actually use him as a defensive end still, if he were to bulk up, I think that would probably be better for him in real life. I just have a hard time getting him behind a guy that big that they're going to put out there as an edge guy that, standing up more often.
Yeah, a great point. Exactly.
But the safeties you mentioned in this whole defensive backfield, any other words you wanted to throw out there about that glut of safeties besides Jeremy Chinn?
I don't know. I'm going to pose a question to you. So if you were really boiling down to it and you needed a defensive back off of this squad, as a defensive back, would you take one of the safeties or would you risk one of the corners?
I mean, Jeremy Chinn is certainly the guy that I would take if we're excluding him because we had talked about him already.
Right.
I would go with Von Bell. We've seen him be productive there in Cincinnati, sort of like Jessie Bates. I think he was ready to get out of there. And to your point, we don't really have it sorted out how this linebacker group is going to play out. We have one good year from Frankie. Shaq Thompson's been there for, it's going to be like 8-9 years or something like that. And he's a good player, but, it's one good linebacker. Brian Burns is more of an edge player. So give me Von Bell, who's shown it more consistently throughout his career than Xavier Woods. Xavier Woods is a fine guy to take, in those deep best ball drafts late in the rounds, is a dart throw like you've talked about. But I think they went out and they, got guys like Eric Rowe. They spent draft pick on a safety. I forgot
about Eric Rowe.
Because they're just not completely happy with what they had there. Or, to push these guys, use a rotation. But I expect Von Bell to be out there pretty much close to 100% of the snaps if he's healthy.
Yeah, if there's one thing we need, it's consistency.
What good is fantasy football content if it doesn't cover both sides of the ball? The SGPN IDP pros have you covered on defense, but we have more to offer than just IDP. Check out the 3D Dynasty podcast with Dave and Brad. That's right, the dude, the dork, and the dynasty. And follow that up with Heroes and Villains, featuring Justin Bruni and Andrew Robb. All of the SGPN fantasy football podcasts pride themselves on their actionable content. They bring the research and analysis you need to win your leagues. So help support SGPN and download the SGPN app and catch all of our premium fantasy football content.
And make sure that if you are watching us over on Facebook or on YouTube, you hit that like button, you get subscribed, or go ahead and follow the page on Facebook, since there's different terminology on all these websites, of course, and get those notifications turned on so when we're live, when all the other SGPN shows are live, and you can catch all of them either right away live, or you can catch us on podcatchers too. You can find us anywhere that podcasts are out there. You can search for the IDP Pros, and you're going to find Gary and I, and then Gary and Johnny as well.
Speaking of catching something, man, catch all the Carl Granderson you can down there for New Orleans off the defensive edge, man. I love this kid. He's actually getting hot. He's been getting hot for the last few months. There's a few people out there loving this kid too. He's got a lot going for him, even though he might not have the draft stock that the depth behind him presumably have. You have Cameron Jordan playing across from him, and he's been a great teacher, I think, because Carl Granderson's been there for a couple of years. When he had his opportunity last year, he performed well. He actually overperformed considering expectations for somebody coming in as a depth piece that wasn't even, I believe he may have been undrafted. It was either later undrafted.
Yep.
Yes. So beautiful guy to get and stash in standard leagues right now because he could make a huge impact as a defensive line play. And unfortunately, yes, here we go. We're going to pick on my own kind and say Cameron Jordan's getting old. So he's a little bit stocked down. And I'm also have other concerns because when Marcus Davenport was actually healthy about a year or two ago, and he had a few weeks there where he had a nice stretch and made some production, they actually was playing Marcus Davenport even times that he didn't produce. They were actually playing Marcus Davenport more on the favorable weak side, a lot more with Cameron Jordan on the strong side. So if they like Carl Granderson, I think we might be able to see the same thing. They're going to put the younger, speedier, more get-at-it guy than the finesse older gentleman on the other side that can, work it better in technique than he can just pure ass speed, I suppose you could say. So I'm kind of looking at this, and I'm thinking that if this works out, that Cameron Jordan might not take a huge hit this year, but he's definitely, you got to start considering that the production is going to start going down, as the age goes up.
And Carl Granderson, to your point about him, he's going to be looking. He had one contract, one legit contract, if you want to talk about decent money. After 2021, he got 2 years, about $5.25 million. If he continues to have, this upward trajectory, like you mentioned, he was an undrafted guy. He hasn't made a ton of money in the NFL. He's a free agent after this year. He's going to be looking to be able to cash in and, make some money off of what he's done and continue to grow. So that could be a good thing in his favor too.
You know who's going to be knocking? Atlanta. Hey, come over here and join Ellis. Neal.
Very well could be. And Gary, I got to knock you a bit here because I think we've gone most of the time through these divisions. And then at the end here in the deep leagues, you started throwing some rookies on here, which is totally out of character for you. But you got Isaiah Foskey and Bryan Bresee, which were early round picks, both of them for the Saints this year. But in deep leagues, apparently you've gone soft on the rookies and you got some interest in them.
It's a last of the series with these divisions. It's the last team that we'll be covering in this series. And I thought to myself, actually, I didn't think that much about it. They're deep guys to start putting on your dynasty leagues. They're the next generation. They're the possibility. So I just wanted to bring him up, man. The interior defensive line there, Vita he's been up and down. He's getting old. I mean, hell, he's old now. He's been in the league, it seems like 4 or 5 years. So at least, possibly, don't quote me. But either way, I just wanted to get him in a bed of.
He's in Tampa.
Oops.
They got Kalen Saunders and Nathan Shepard as the defensive tackles.
Yeah, Shepard
right now.
Shepard. I apologize.
Either way, sure we clarified it.
Right. They're stacking it up. If I remember right, too, they also added another defensive line rookie this season, but I might not be sure about that. But they're replenishing the stocks. Cameron Jordan's going to eventually be moving on. They're going to need that money for something else. And Carl Granderson's still fairly young, so he's going to be sticking around. I like this. I like the development that's happening here in this little rebuild. It's a positive move. Of course, we're talking about defensive tackles, so they're only going to be so valuable in defensive L or DL designations.
And deep down, former darling, people had some hope after Jamal Adams had moved on from the Jets. He didn't do a ton. He still hasn't done a ton in New Orleans, but Marcus May there, this guy that you got pointing downwards a bit.
Yeah, he's not worked out to be the guy that he was supposed to be. He didn't do it quite in New York. He's had injury problems and, going down to New Orleans, which I was never in love with anyways. But I I was not against people going to get Marcus May last year, but it didn't pay off for him. So this year I'm bringing it up. It's just time to move on from Marcus May. It just does not look like that he's going to ever amount to anything with DBs, a dime a dozen, and even streamable. I just don't see putting any draft stock into him whatsoever anymore. Leading me to asking you about Demarius Davis and Pete Werner. All right, so Werner flashed last year, came on the scene at the beginning of the year when he was before his injuries, and he had a nice, I believe, a lower LB1 average across the board in points in most leagues. Then he got injured. Of course, Davis, he's a wily veteran that might have actually started out the season kind of slow while Werner was doing this, but Davis leveled out by the time that Werner got himself back into the rotation. Of course, it was later in the season. I don't think he did very well or it lasted very long. So he's not quite a sleeper this year as he could have been last year, or maybe would have been called last year, but he's definitely a stock up guy this year. But if you're looking at a redraft, and you want the consistency and the sure shot, who are you taking? Werner with this ceiling that could possibly get there, or Davis with the floor that's just probably going to be consistent more?
So, I mean, I'm probably a little bit more down on both of them just because you could see the situation like you kind of did to start the year where they eat into each other a bit more than you did later in the season. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, you look at over the last 8 games for Demario Davis. Combined tackles, 8, 8, 8, 7, 8, 5, 7, 8. Start of the season, 6, 5, 5, 8, 3, 9, 4, 3. So to your point, when Pete Werner was healthy, it was a little bit slower than people had expected. And this is with 100% snap share across every game that he was in. Demario Davis was a every down player out there. And he's sort of really found a niche for himself after, he was started off a little bit slow in his career. He didn't do a whole lot with the Jets his first year, but there's 2 years outside of his rookie year where he didn't hit 100 combined tackles. So I think Demario Davis is fine. He's sort of the name that's out there in redraft leagues. More redraft people probably don't know as much about Pete Werner as dynasty players do. Dynasty players are probably going to be inclined to go with Pete Werner more. I think you're fine taking whichever one goes later and having a fine probably, upside linebacker 2 on your team. But I just don't see either one of them having one of those huge seasons unless one of them's hurt for the majority of the season.
Yeah. For Pete Werner to do it, if there's one of them, I'd have to say we're going to lean Pete Werner, but it's going to be because he's some kind of interception machine or pass defended machine, fumble. He's going to have to. He's not going to be able to do it in combined tackles with Davis next to him. It's just not happening. And Davis is older, so yeah, you was talking about him. I remember being down on him when he was with the Jets. He was when he became their middle linebacker star for them for a little while, if I remember right.
In 2013, 2014, he had over 100 combined, and then the last year he didn't. Then he went to Cleveland for a year, then back to the Jets for a year, and that sandwich year with the Jets is when he had that huge season with 135 combined tackles. Right.
Well, but getting to my point, it's just he's older. He's not that interception, forced fumble. He's just not that kind of player. He's just a grinder that gets you the combined tackles, and he's doing his job very well. So if you're looking for big play, then yeah, we're definitely going with Werner because he does have that instinct to get his nose to the ball.
And last year, Davis was the oldest starting regular, 100 down, whatever, 100% snap, but linebacker in the league at 33. And it looks like he's going to be doing it again at 34 this year for the Saints. So standing the test of time, Demario Davis has. Speaking of time, that's about our time here. Any final thoughts on the NFC South, Gary, for the folks out there?
Oh, I like some of the options that they have here. I like some of this. Well, I mean, you got two of my favorite sleepers in here with Granderson and Elliss. So, yeah, I like this division from an IDP perspective. It might be one of my better ones or one of the ones I like the best. I'll tell you what, I'm going to go ahead and sign this off and let you carry us out of here. So I can't wait to see y'all next week when I guess we're going to maybe do some blended mock. We can figure out how to do that, huh, brother?
Yeah, we'll have to see if we can find one either that's been done or we get one done to discuss with people after the fact, or it's going to be hard to probably get people to do a mock live time at 10 a.m. on a Friday, but we'll see what we can get done for people.
No. I'll put a post out here in a little bit, man. We'll have them just freaking knocking the door down to get in. You know what I mean?
All right. We'll look forward to that for next week. But that is it for us. Gary's going to be recording with Johnny to get the IDP Pro Players Pod out for you guys. So make sure you tune into your podcatchers for that. We will see you next week, and have a great weekend, everybody.